Should government be run more like a business? This is a question that passionate advocates of government reform often ask. And the argument runs something like this. Businesses, because they have profit motive, are more motivated to be efficient and to mind their bottom line and utilize their resources better. And perhaps if government had those same incentives, then government bureaucracy would not be the absolute disaster that it often is. Now, this is perhaps true, but it's not a good model for government reform for a couple of reasons. First of all, government is not a producer, whereas private business is. And this is important because private business owns its resources. The money that it invests, it mines because it is risking it. And if it makes a bad investment, then ultimately it's the business owner who pays the price, who stands to lose their business, who might have to fire his or her employees, who will be out of a job, who might have to go through bankruptcy. So there are all of these ramifications to it. The same thing is not true for the government. The government, no matter even if we did reform bureaucracy so that it ran more like a business, still is not going to go out of business. When there's dysfunction in bureaucratic agencies, look at the VA, people are ultimately not held to account. So even if you attempt to incentivize people through a profit motive by allowing them, to keep their earnings, which is ironic given that the same people who advocate for bureaucracy and its larger role in society generally do so on the business, that business looks out for its own interests and is perverted by profit motive. So the idea that that somehow is evil when private businesses do it, but is a good thing when the government does it, is an interesting, logical, incongruous position. But government does not have that risk. It's stable. It's going to be there. And so there simply is not going to ever be that level of accountability. And it has to take its resources from somewhere. It has to either borrow the money or it gets it through tax revenue, which again means that even if you give government a profit motive, because it's not ultimately its resources that it's risking, it's not going to have that same level of concern with being very cautious about approaching risk and reward and wanting to grow that money, right? This is something that we were all taught as children is, your toys, you are more guarded with how you treat your own things than you do someone else's. And our parents of course taught us that we should treat other people's things with the same respect that we do our things. But government doesn't stick to this principle. Government is never going to stick to this principle because government is not going away. It is permanent. The other reason that government should not run like a business is because business, the act of production, relies upon the rational process of the mind. It relies on business owners using their discretion to be able to apply principles to first imagine a product, then to bring it into being, to create a functioning business and to market and to sell it. It's a good thing when individuals use discretion in their rational processes in their private lives. When government does it, when government uses discretion, it means that government is discriminating against certain actors and upholding certain actors. And that's a bad basis for law. And effectively, it means that we don't have rule of law. What we have is rule of individual will, the individual will of whomever happens to be in charge of a particular agency. And you can't have freedom in the truly individual sense, and you can't have limited government when you have, whether they're elected officials or unelected bureaucrats, when anyone is in a position where they can codify their will, put the force of law behind it, which the rest of us don't have the requisite power to justly challenge because government has a monopoly on force. It means that government is over and above the individual, and it means that effectively individual biases can become the basis of law. It means that the particular predilections of a bureaucrat or of an elected official can be used to try to sway public policy. It gets rid of the objectivity and the empiricism of rule of law, wherein everyone is viewed not in terms of their needs or wants or desires, but in terms of people or really entities who hold rights and who hold them equally, and therefore that needs to be the basis of adjudication whenever there is some sort of conflict that arises. And instead of that, now we have empowered government officials who are saying, well, I sympathize with this particular cause, so I want to do something to help it. But again, because government is not a producer, because it has to take its resources from somewhere, that means that it's taking from someone in order to help whoever its favorite cause is. And that creates a hierarchical basis of law, a hierarchy based on need, and not even need that can be empirically judged, but is really based on wherever the sympathies of a given bureaucrat or an official lie. And again, this is something that businesses don't do, because businesses, yes, they discriminate, but they discriminate with their own resources, and it's their own resources that they're risking. And again, that's not the case with government. And that's why government should not be run as a business. If that mindset breaches the gap between the private sector and the public sector, then we start to have a government that is run, set free of its limits, and is going to act in ways that are going to impinge civil liberties and really the entire culture of individual sovereignty.